So what I wanted to do with this session was give the opportunity to do some Q&A on Upstart. Not QA, Q&A. Basically give everybody the opportunity to ask me about problems they've had with it, ask me about problems they see with it, ask me what development plans we've got, and ask me about what Fedora are up to, and so on. So if everybody sits and stares at their laptops, this is going to be a very quick session, because I'm going to answer. You've got to ask the question.
So what is Fedora doing?
Should we start off with systemd?
No.
I have a shorter one.
Huh?
I have a shorter question.
Oh right, let's David start.
See, I figured if I started that, someone else would jump in.
It'll be the whole session if we do that.
David, would you like to start?
You mentioned some changes in the way that Upstart will be used for 0.10.
Yep.
Moving towards managing job and instances directly. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So one of the complaints I keep getting about Upstart at the moment is the relationship between a config file on disk and a job and an instance is very confusing, and Upstart likes giving you error messages like unknown instance when you try and stop something. So part of what I want to do there is make this very much more complicated to simplify it. So basically what you'll have in 0.10, so just for everyone who knows, 0.10 is the version number of the next version of Upstart. What you have in 0.10 is a single list of services or tasks. That single list will not be too deep like it is. You won't have jobs and instances as distinctions. You'll have a single list. You'll see Apache, you'll see dbus, you'll see Squid, you'll see TTY 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. However, some of those things may be the same underlying config file, but you won't see config files. When you ask Upstart for your list of services, your list of jobs, it will give you the list of jobs. It won't give you the list of config files. Right now you have to look up the config file, look up the instances of that config file. So instead you'll go, just show me the jobs. Here's your jobs. For Getty, for example, if there's 6 of them running, you'll get 6 Gettys back, and then the config file and accessing the config of a job will be a method of the actual job. So you'll say, give me the job for Getty. Give me the jobs. You see 6 Gettys, you'll say for those, well, give me the config for Getty, and then you'll realize the 6 Gettys have the same config object. The config object refers to the config file, but to be honest, you can make config objects via the dbus interface, but otherwise you don't really worry about them too much. They represent the files on disk. So it simplifies it a lot more. Instances will turn up at various points. Sorry, we still call them instances, but just don't worry about it. So you'll get jobs to turn up. Jobs can be created by Upstart without you realizing. So when you create a config file, if you see a job, you get one or more jobs for it immediately, and they show up in the jobs list. So that should become a lot simpler, especially for UI authors. You just go in and you say, right, okay, I've got end jobs, start, stop jobs. Jobs, when they're stopped, still stay in the jobs list, which is different from instances. So when you stop Apache, Apache is still there. It's still there as an Apache job. It's just a stopped Apache job. When you start it, it starts again. You can create, and then if you want to do things like disable it, you would go to Apache, you'd get the config from that object and add the get the config path and disable it that way.
Now,
so it's a slightly different. It's the
what's the preferred way of disabling it today?
Upstart does not have support for disabling services. Just to say that, you can do one of 3 things. You can delete the file. Dpackage will honor that when you do an upgrade. It won't put the file back.
Delete or rename.
Or rename. Rename the file as the second one. I tend to use .conf-disabled.
Yeah.
Upstart only looks at things ending in .conf, so if you change the extension, it becomes disabled. The third thing you can do, but these 2 things stop you from being able to manually start and stop. The third thing you can do is comment out start online in the actual job. That means Upstart still knows about it, you can still start it manually, but it won't start it automatically. So I'm going to answer your other question there. In 0.10, what we're looking at doing, I always say we, what I'm looking at doing is...
remind the other people the hell.
They never Have you met our copyright assignment policy? No one in the community wants to have. Anyway, yeah, so in 0.10, you'll have this idea that a job is in automatic or manual starting, and so on. I'll get a little bit more into that if someone asks it in detail. But fundamentally, you don't disable a job, you place it into a manual mode. That means Upstart will not automatically start it. It always will still appear in the jobs list. The sysadmin would better start and stop it if they want. But the UI could mark it, this is in manual mode, because that would be obvious. But then marking, you place it in manual mode, you don't disable it. So you say, this is manual, Upstart will never start and stop it automatically. It's up to your sysadmin to do that. The probable way this is going to be done is we're going to bring back the idea of etc default, but probably with a different directory name or something to avoid confusion. It'll be a set of files, this will be empty, or it will be etc in it, just a file alongside. Don't know yet. Haven't really worked that out. It'll be a set of files which are parsed along with the conf file for the job, and are parsed afterwards. So everything in those files overrides anything in the job. So we call them override files. So you can change the value of environment variables. So a lot of them will just have foo equals bar, whatever type things in them, which will override any variable set by default in the conf file. But you'll still be able to override those with a start line, like you can now. So they'll be like, you better provide, override dot options, say, foo equal, start, demonize, false demonize, the kind of things you do right now with etc default. But you also better put limits in there. So if as sysadmin you want to add resource limits to a job or a quota limit or anything else, you can put those in there as well, because they can go in the conf file, so they can go in the override file. And you better put the word manual in there, which is how you specify manual mode for a job. And I would expect a tool to write these override files. And in fact, your summer code guy talked to me about it, because I want to make sure that things like in the conf file, if there's a foo equals bar in the conf file with a comment above it, I'd like to make sure the UI eventually shows that as an option you can toggle in the job with the documentation comment, and copies that into the override file with the comment. So,
Sounds good.
Yeah. And then the system tools UI should let you fiddle with limits and resource limits. Is yours related to David's, or is it? No, right, I'll come to you in a minute. So, Case?
So right now, Upstart has really good support for explicit dependencies.
Mm-hmm.
I need this service before that other
Yes.
service. I have encountered a kind of bizarre situation where a daemon needs another daemon only when the first daemon is configured to require it. So, for example, RNG tools, which is used for stuffing random entropy into the kernel, can get its entropy from several sources.
Right.
Most of them are physical devices, but one of the sources is the TPM module.
Yep.
And it talks to the TPM module through the trousers daemon, which is what's responsible for aggregating communication to the TPM device. So only in the case of having configured RNG tools to need the TPM service does trousers need to start first.
Okay, so how do you configure it to use the thing you said?
Right now it's in etc default.
Right, perfect. Good. So a job has an environment. So one of the things Upstart links together, jobs have an environment, and they're the set of environment variables Upstart places in that job. Those are considered as key to the job as anything else, and those distinguish different copies of the job. Okay, so you could have two daemons running with different environment variables. Upstart sees them as different instances of the job. Yep. Now, these environment variables are exportable to other jobs that use them. So Upstart's an event-based system, but we're moving a lot of the way away from a lot of the start-on, stop-on kind of early event stuff to much more interesting standards, which still use the event queue, but just know that they're much sugary. When you get the event related to the job includes the job's environment. So from you can actually say something. Right now, you could do it. So if you have your one daemon, let's call it, you're based in, what is it called, RNG tools?
RNG tools.
RNG tools. So if RNG tools had an environment m foo equals bar, in backend equals TPM or whatever, you can say export backend.
Right.
Now everything else can go starting RNG tool backend equals ... That works right now. But then there'll be better sugar for doing this kind of thing. And because we've got the event system works in both ways, you can add as a dependent, you can make it so if RNG tool starts, something else starts first, or something else starts after.
So I would have multiple start-on lines for each.
Right now you would, yes, but eventually you won't.
And for all of the other ones, it would just be start on file system,
Yep.
backend equals blah, and the last would be start on file system, backend equals blah and trousers,
Yeah.
and trousers starting or whatever. Okay.
So it would be nice if I could ask you to actually drop me an email to just describe the pattern, the relationships, because I can make sure we've got sugar that makes that really easy. Yep. Okay, but yeah, that's you can do that right now, but then there will be better with the override support. You'll be able to do that much easier because you'll be able to change that, and then with the better instance and environment support, you'll be able to
Will override be packaged, or will override be something that we would?
Okay, so override. That directory, if it's a directory, it must be empty. If it's files, they must not exist. The intent is this is a thing that is supported, however, nothing should ever ship one of these. If a package is shipping an override file, it's doing it wrong.
Then in this specific case with trousers and RNG tools, overrides don't help them.
No, they do, because the conf file has the default one, backend equals something, with a comment above it, and we make sure tools, which let you configure it, see these in the conf file and let you copy them out into the override file, and make an override file with a new value.
But normally we just change Etsy default.
Sure, but
RNG tools.
so the reason I don't like you end up with the same, so changing Etsy default, why not just change etc init rngtool.com? It's still a conf file.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is my thing. If you like the fact that you ship them in the packages, just change etc init. It's supposed to be it's supposed to be a conf file. The syntax is supposed to be relatively easy to do. If it's an override file, well, shipping an override file in a package is inherently broken. It's an override file. It's there for sysadmins to get around the limitations of the packaging system, prompting for merges every time you upgrade.
So it would be something where documentation would say, if you don't have hardware or RNG, you would put this in the override file and move it.
Sure. Yeah. Exactly. Or you can just modify the conf file. There's no reason a sysadmin can't modify the conf file either. It just means they get a depackage prompt if they go in two directions. The override file is there for tools to not write to the conf file.
That is one of the biggest pieces of sysadmin pushback.
Yeah. But it's there, so the idea is tools shouldn't write to the conf files. Sysadmins are quite happy to modify the conf files. They know what they're getting into.
Some of them are,
Yeah, but tools shouldn't write to conf files. They shouldn't modify conf files. They can use these override files, and sysadmins can learn about these override files and say, oh, actually, that's really good because I can just Puppet can just drop 100 of these in, or they can do it themselves. So yes, packages should never ship an override file. There should never be anything in whatever we decide. If it's a directory or a file name, they should not exist. But they are there for tools to write. If you want to change defaults, put the default in the conf file. If you put environment variable in the conf file, it is literally the lowest of the low. It can be overridden by an override. It can be overridden by start on. It can be overridden by an event. It's literally a very, very low default. You can say start RNG style backend equals, right, you can do that now. Was that your question? No. So what was your question?
My question is, we have an increasing amount of information about relationships between startup files
Yes.
and the LSB information when we emit that redirection.
Yes.
For the, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 that is going to be a while before they can go to
Sure.
Upstart. Do we have any means we can parse that to generate
Yes.
conf files?
Yeah, so the Red Hat guys wrote this a while back. So the idea is that we Upstart just treats the etc.init.d directory as an additional source of config files and parses the LSB heads out of them and generates Upstart jobs internally that have the dependencies listed in the header. They did that about a year ago. They don't ship it. We don't ship it yet, but we're going to. That's always been planned. I just wanted to get the LTS out of the way. So, but yes. So the idea. So just to clarify, Upstart will directly read etc.init.d. It will generate jobs for each of those things, and you will use start and stop on those things just as you do now. They work because of the whole pre-start, post-stop gimmick that we use a lot. And the LSB headers on them will mean that they can independ, and that just works fine. You end up kind of replacing sys5rc and insert. But because sys5rc is really reliable, and we've used it for 273 years, I kind of wanted to do one last LTS using that before I went and replaced the mechanism by the fact that sys5rc was actually run. Does that make sense? I'm getting like Colin in my old age. I'm being conservative.
So of course the other benefit of sys5rc is still that it's still running inside TrueRoots.
Yes. But the other thing is, Upstart does need TrueRoots support. right now, the only things we really converted were things that don't work well in churoots themselves anyway. But yes, we do need to.
Well,
So
I converted OpenSSH but left the init script there.
yeah. So
which caused a certain amount of confusion.
it's a good point to talk about churoots briefly.
Containers.
Churoots have
CH-roots are not valuable for security.
They-
Containers should be used.
correct,
Yeah.
and containers have
I knew
their own
that.
PID1.
Yes, use them for
their own
convenience.
namespace.
Yes.
So if you're using a churroot for convenience, you have two options. One, you don't want services running that churroot, just Upstart should ignore it. Upstart's really good at that use case right now. The other thing you want to do is that you want Upstart to run services in that churroot. The difficulty is that you, it's basically something we have to extend Upstart support. So there'll be a top level conf file where you can add churroot directories. Upstart will look in churroot/etc in it as well for a source of jobs, because you can only have one in Upstart running on the system per container, which is why containers are better. But yeah, you can do that, and then you can, when you call init control from inside a churrooted init control, you'll see the churrooted list of jobs. When you call the external one, you can see both.
So the other thing that would, I think, be helpful for that case is, as you say, being able to parse and separate init.d.
Yes.
If we can do that inside
Sure.
churroots as well, that
Yep.
means it is relatively straightforward to run a non-Upstart system inside your churroot.
Yep.
And to have Upstart deal with
Yep.
starting it up. So
Correct.
you have an OpenSSH rather than a port for your deputy churroot.
Yep. Correct. The other thing you can do, obviously, you can have churrooted services now, which is churroot blah in your conf, but they go in the top level in right now. Okay. So that's, okay. Questions? More questions?
Yeah, what
yeah.
sort of things, I'm Chris Brown, by the way, we exchanged emails and at one point I volunteered to write some
Yes. Awesome.
documentation.
Hi, good to meet you.
I'm beginning to realise that there's a lot more of it that I don't know about than I thought there was. Thinking about that, what do you think a system administrator actually needs to know about Upstart, and in what ways do you anticipate you will interact with it?
So I want to make sure there's a reasonable set of tools to use. You know, the sysadmin should know about start and stop and init control and the GUI tool we have, or the equivalent curses tool we have for it. I think there's a second stage. They then want to know about the conf files and the override files and how they work. Hopefully, right now you need to know about the event system and the way events work, because it's very much exposed. Even you have to learn how events work and just to read a conf file. As the syntax gets a bit easier, I'm hoping that will be more of an advanced topic. If you're writing a book, you'd cover the tools first, then the config file format, then last you'd cover how events actually flow between the system, how dependencies work in the Upstart environment. I don't, right now, unfortunately, that last chapter has to go first, and I think that's more of a design flaw than anything else. And
Would you anticipate that administrators would need to write conf files from scratch?
There are always classes of administrators who need to write conf files from scratch. They're the kind who today write init scripts from scratch. It's hard to write init scripts from scratch right now, so hopefully that will be an easier thing for them to do. But if they're writing their own services or their own tasks, yes, they will. They'll obviously want to write conf files from scratch.
So
Or-
while I do agree that it's hard to write init scripts from scratch, we also provide, perhaps because it's harder, we also provide more help, so we have a skeleton.
Yeah,
is it worth providing a simple skeleton with some
I think so. Yeah, well,
cognitive work, for example?
yep. And skeleton tasks, skeleton services. I think they've worked good to have. I think we need, that needs to be there. It needs to be better documented to write to. How do I make something run every hour while Apache's running? Should be, that should be an easy example to follow.
I think for distro developers, Man5 in it is fine.
Yeah, exactly. And Upstart's mostly been focused towards, right now our focus has been getting the other distros to adopt it. They've finally done that, so now let's focus on getting sysadmins to adopt it.
There used to be some feature in its CTL, as I remember, that actually lets you list the events.
Yeah.
Has that gone away?
Yeah, because, as I said, I'm trying to get removed. The events are a very core to how Upstart works, but they shouldn't be core to how you understand Upstart. So they were there in the earlier versions because you had to really understand the flow of events. And now it's a little less. You now need to, you don't think of events so much, you think of other services And then, you know, in future versions, you won't even care about the events. You know, the event is just a queue inside Upstart of how it changes state. You'll care about services and tasks and states.
So that does bring up something slightly different. I find that when I'm writing anything which is really complicated, I have to have
Lots and lots of
I
staff
have to
online.
deploy all of my experience in,
Yes.
in knowing how the system works in order to understand what I need to write.
Cool. Sure.
And this seems suboptimal. What can we do in terms of tools to help people understand what their job is going to do? So I've seen some graphical tools and like.
Yeah, so first of all, it's probably easy to understand that Upstart Node 10 has a very different view of the system than Upstart Node 6 does. Upstart Node 6 is a service manager with a very simple event tree that you can exploit with start on and stop on to make it run and stop services. The reason I kept telling anyone, to keep hiding the fact there was documentation for this was because I didn't want people writing those, because they get very, very complicated very quickly. And everyone goes, oh my God, I can't write the job I want. And it's, well, yeah, I know that because that's really temporary. So it's not 10, we've got a different model, which is, can a service be run? That's one, sorry, can a job exist? So you'll have a base thing of saying, well, can the conf file turn into a job? This will be completely hidden. You won't be able to really influence this, but it's things like if the path listed by exec doesn't exist, the conf file won't turn into a job automatically, just hidden from it. If an exec line of a dependency doesn't exist, the conf file won't turn into a job. You know, things like that. There'll be a first of all, can the job?
If the thing you said, if one of the things if a conjunctive
Yeah.
thing you said start element doesn't exist, then
That kind of thing, yeah. So can the conf file turn into a job as base thing? If it can't turn into a job, it won't show up in the jobs list. You'll have to go into the config list and ask Upstart why it's not a job. Better API is needed to make sure that's possible. So that means a tool will be able to list the conf files, explain why they're not jobs, what's missing. This is missing this path. That's where dependencies come from. So I'm trying not to use the word dependencies because it really confuses the bug out of people. The second part is, can the job, so right, that first part also can be linked into instantiation. This is kind of, I don't know how to explain this yet, but let me give you a worked example. You have a dbus session bus service, okay? This service represents the dbus session bus. It has attached environment, which is the address of that dbus session bus. So everything that uses or requires that dbus session bus inherits the dbus bus address, okay? If you now spawn 3 of these with different bus addresses, you have 3 jobs with the same conf file. 3 instances in effect, each with different bus addresses. Now, if you have something that requires the bus and is started automatically whenever the bus is, you will implicitly get 3 of those jobs will appear. 1 for each of the buses.
There are 3 instances of the session bus.
Correct.
And presumably you would be able to limit to a particular
Correct.
one of those with.
Yeah, or 1 for any session bus, yeah, correct. However, so the instantiation, can a config file turn into a job and how many jobs should be turned into becomes a core part of the system, right? The next stage on top of that is should a job be run? Should a job be running? This can be, there will be limits on things. So there's a priority idea, the idea that these are the things that are maximum priority to get running. This is used on boot in particular. If a job that has got really high priority is still in the status of starting up or is still in the state, the task is still in the state of running, lower priority things will be deferred from being started. Right? So should a job be running? It means jobs can be held in the I'm ready to be started, I'm just not running yet state. The other thing is power states. Jobs could be marked to be not, you can have services which say only on AC, only on battery power. They'll still appear to be ready to be running, they just won't run because your power requirements are low. More particularly, you'll have a low power state. So if you say to yourself, well, we're on battery and we're aggressively power management, Upstart can go around stopping services that you don't need. You know, why run cron when you're on a lower power state? You know, you don't need it. Or that part, those things will go down. Those, and then this, I was thinking about this, and I kind of realised that I go around killing services when I'm watching a video on a projector. So, you know, things like that, Upstart can actively stop services because you're saying, I have a high demand for the CPU. So services that are declared as not being essential but consume large amounts of CPU, Upstart can go around and stop them and defer them from being started until you stop watching the video. So active management of the service state is one of the things I want to do there. And that's really important for ARM and stuff like that. So, and then the final thing on top is the actual activation of the service, i.e. what actually kicks the service into starting. It might be the fact that all of the above is true, or it might be it needs another event, or it might be a timed interval, and so on. So these things kind of stack on top of each other. So I think the tools should make this very easy. Tools can list the states, you know. Oh, this service, here's a service, and there's some states, you know, power, battery thing. Just, you know, I think the tool, if I was doing UI, I would say, well, this service exists in these states, drag and drop kind of thing. And this depends on this, so draw a little tree type thing. You know, that's how I would visualize it.
I think the dependency ordering, where I'd like to better term the start ordering, is in cases where that is vital, such as in the cloud and in jobs.
Yep.
Having some way to visualize that.
Yeah, and the flip side of this is also Upstart will keep a detailed journal of what it did, so you can always plug in the tool how it actually worked. You can view the boot from its dependency graph and its ordering and
something
time.
Like Dutch for boost, but a bit more comprehensive.
Yeah. So I'm going to stress this because I think there's going to be some need for UI designers to come in here, at both a curses, text level and at a graphical level. But I think that it should be, hopefully, I'm hoping that the result will actually be relatively easy to understand. This service depends on these and only exists in power and AC states, or is excluded from lower power state. I think that's what it'll actually look like. SSH doesn't it would be there. It depends on file system and stuff, and SSH is excluded from the no network use case, but it's not excluded from I'm in maintenance mode. That's how it would look, I think.
There's a question from Brian.
Yeah, I've also got a question over the back, so I'm just going to be. How would I make a job that starts on idle? Can I just come back to your question? Because I've got another question in the room, but I will come back to your question because that's actually kind of I want to talk about something else before we hit the end. I've got half an hour left. So thank you. How would I make a job start? I will answer your question. Okay. So you get a question?
Thinking about how the init server verifies who's calling is
Yes.
reboot.
Yeah, we were talking about that in the corridor on the way down.
Yeah, so do you have any plans of doing the policy kit? I mean, I mean, I can tell right now policy kit just those user IDs anyway, so it's not helpful.
Correct, yeah. So the reason I haven't done policy kit is because it only is no better than dbus security.
Mind you, I was wrong before. They're actually, I was looking in the wrong place for hooks. There is SE Linux support right now, so we could generalize that to a more general security support.
All right, sweet.
But,
which means Upstart has SE Linux support built in.
But is that what you would want? Is what I want.
I think so. I don't really know. I don't think that's my decision. I think I should make sure that whatever security models people want work. That was completely passing the buck, wasn't it? To be honest, I don't really know enough about the concerns of security because I can imagine, for example, situations where you have two sets of user namespaces, and we're talking to one init daemon. So I think the UID stuff isn't really good enough, but it's good enough for now. But it's no worse than everything we've already got. So shutdown always worked if you were root. So I haven't regretted or anything, but yes, I agree. It could be a whole lot better.
Is there anything, I mean, I'm thinking through in terms of reboot and shutdown. Is there anything else that Upstart would care about?
Oh, well, yeah, everything like starts. Reboot is just a specialized instance of emit an event. Start, stop, emit, they're the three fundamental pieces of Upstart, and all three of those have the same security, i.e. the same user as the target server. Yeah.
So that is something we need to think about general.
Yeah, I think it's something that people who are far more au fait with security than me need to talk about and tell me. I will pretty much go with whatever's right on that one.
Okay.
That's easy. That's easy. Okay, was there other? Sorry, I did got Brian's question there. Any other questions related to security or that?
Are there any tools at the moment that will show service dependencies?
No, there aren't. No. There have been attempts to write Perl scripts which...
I'm presumably not the first person to suggest that.
Yeah, no one really gets, they get as far as not ever writing at all. We actually added a stand... Iron's kind of got half of one, yeah. I added the emit stuff, so emits but that confuses everybody. But the idea is that's just, it's there, it's ignored by Upstart, and it was the idea it's supposed to make it easy for people to write tools that outputted Dotty and stuff, but no one ever got really around to that. I never have got around to it because I'm always too busy with code when I've got Upstart time. But I would like someone to contribute. Okay, any other questions related to that? Because there's lots of Brian's
I have a question about how to debug.
About which?
Debug. I mean, because this Upstart makes the jobs running in parallel.
Yes.
And
Debugging
if I put out
system and
system stuff in one job, but I cannot figure out which job impacts the system. So how can I do?
I was what's mentioning to Colin. There's this idea of a debug mode where you can read the journal when you're done of everything Upstart did. So it says, I got this event, I started this service caused this event, which started this. So you can get this very detailed journal of everything Upstart did and follow the stories. So this might be enough to go back and it's rendered by, you'll better render it by time, you better render it by service tree. This will be enough for you probably if you can get to the end of the boot and something just went wrong, this may be enough for you to see these two things lined up in the opposite order. So this boot they were that way around, this boot they were that way around. In the detailed cases, this same mechanism will be used to do an interactive boot. So you press F8 or something on boot, and then rather than just log it in the journal, it'll put you a question saying, I've just received the start of Apache event, I want to start this service, should I? You go, yes, no, defer it, go, start it with +E so you can see what the shell does, start it with ftrace, there'll be some base, or give me a shell at this point, there'll be some base, the daily debugging tool to do an interactive boot.
So this mechanism is already exists or
What's
in the next version?
Mechanism.
This method.
Is this journal something that currently exists?
No, this is all not 10. This is all discussing what we're doing for Maverick. This is a very Maverick thing. But yeah, that's what we need. Right now you have ---- verbose, which gives you a kind of a dump of everything it does. But if you know Upstart well enough, you can work out what it's doing. But the problem with verbose is it says, I've had this event, and then you see it start some jobs. There's no link. It doesn't say, I've had this event, so I started these jobs. And you can kind of get things can get intermixed in the verbose answer. So the idea of the journal is very specifically, it's a binary format, logs causality. It says this event caused this caused this event, caused this event. So you can build a tree of everything that happened, you can build a timeline of everything that happened. I really need that.
I know that, but something is complicated in like the ODN testing, because they do maybe 50 machines.
Yeah, so then the idea is you just grab the journals out of each one and then you compare the journals. If one fails, one works, you've got journals, you put them side by side, you can say, well, things happened in a slightly different order on that one, this clearly happened, this failed on that one. They should show up really well.
So
I really can't do it. Yeah, that is going to be a Maverick thing.
We've talked about this one-to-one, but it'd be nice to have it in the public session. I was asking some questions about making Upstart jobs easier to debug.
Yes.
So particularly with Plymouth, it's very difficult to debug what's going on without affecting how the service starts. I often find that if things are starting in the background, it's hard to attach SJS to them and so on. And it seems like the sort of thing where a bit more, a few more dedicated verbs in Upstart.
Yeah, exactly.
Help us out.
Yep. Again, I'm all ears for wishes.
I have a question about a while back when I needed to make a conf file for a package that's now using Upstart. This is control, but my question was about documentation. Is when services are migrated to Upstart and packages need to ship conf files for them, who's going to tell us to use the right, Upstart services now? Where is this documentation going to lie? Is someone going to put it on the wiki? Is it going to be you? Do I need to do this
Sorry,
for you?
I'm not quite sure of the question.
Oh, so just at the time it was, I remember finding some completely out of date thing about what the maintainer script was supposed to do at the time, and it was wrong because it was not mentioning Upstart and stuff. That's
Yeah.
the kind of
We
documentation.
probably need, so in terms of job file format, one thing I will stress, the current job file format is going to be supported by .10. Because the one reason for keeping the current simpler job format and not doing some stuff late was because at least it's a standard that we can implement for a while. I mean, .10 can continue to read those job files and still work. The maintainer script stuff is something where we changed it very rapidly. It was being continuously rewritten. I'm facing well away from the microphone. It was being continuously rewritten all the way through through the development process. So the reason the documentation was out of date was because the documentation, it's easier to write code than documentation, and if you write the documentation first, you get it wrong. So
sorry, I missed that. Which maintainer script?
The maintainer script stuff, how you use Upstart jobs in maintainer scripts, how you start and stop them. And yeah, it's still not right, so yeah. Who's responsible for writing documentation? I do tend to try and write documentation, I'm just particularly bad at it.
I could do some for you if you tell me when you're done with one of them.
Yeah, I can give you, there's always one that's the current best example, and I don't know which it is at the moment.
Actually, for the record, man 5 minutes, I think it's great.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Right, I just wanted to, do you want to? No? Anyone else got any question that's not related to systemd? Yeah, no, I know, I was just going to come back to that. Okay, we got 10, 15 minutes, so I'm going to quickly mention something else that's worth talking about for 5 minutes. Anyone here not heard of systemd this week?
Not heard of it.
Systemd.
And which rock have you been living on?
Yeah. So, Leonard Puttering. You may know him from bugs such as my network is full of DNS requests, or bugs such as my sound card no longer works on my machine's CPU100 CPU, or bugs such as my SSD no longer works. He's a guy at Fedora, and he's very similar to myself. He likes rewriting things from scratch rather than borrowing anyone else's technology. And I'm being mean. Don't worry, I am being jokey. I actually quite good friends with Leonard. Has written an init daemon, and he's positing it as an alternative to Upstart. And being a Fedora guy, there's at least some small chance that Fedora might switch away from Upstart to go use systemd. And Keith Sivers, the UDEV maintainer, has also kind of been talking to him about it a lot. So there's a small chance that SUSE might switch away from Upstart to systemd. And there's a chance that Debian might use systemd instead because of Tollef. Now, systemd is wrong. Now, I can explain in very detail why it is. Basically, it's an implementation of LaunchD, the Apple approach. The Apple approach is kind of cute. Basically, it really appeals to people who are pure engineers, and they really like it. The idea is, how it works is you start everything at once. You have no dependencies, you have no relationships, but you start all the services. But the init daemon listens on the sockets for them. So it's an inetd, not an initd, it's an inetd. And you let the services worry about the dependencies by connecting to each other on their sockets. So if something depends on dbus, it connects to the dbus address. The dbus address is being listened to by init until dbus is actually started, in which case you end up at dbus. Passes the socket along to it. You may notice Leonard contributed socket passing to dbus a while back. So yeah, there's this whole, that's how it works. Now, this sounds really interesting from an engineering point of view. It's like really elegant, wow. Well, the first kind of gotcha is they don't actually use it this way in LaunchD. They use Mac services and frameworks. So init does start on-demand services and frameworks, but that's much more like dbus service activation than it is like, inetd. They don't really use the init stuff. The reason they don't use the init stuff is because of the four-way stop problem. You have a bunch of services, they're all started at once, they all connect to each other, and you end up with a little ring of services all blocking on each other's connect calls because they're all connecting to each other in a circle. And these are quite easy. Dbus, DH client, network manager, and something that uses network is just a typical example of that exists in our boot. And Apple solved this by, first of all, using Mac frameworks rather than sockets, and secondly, they write their entire core operating system and don't let anyone else contribute it. So they can kind of work around, make sure they don't have these issues. So it's kind of cute, but it's kind of cute in a Yeah, it's really, really cool from an engineering point of view, but by the time you've worked it out and really tried to build a system out of it, you're going to have to put in so many hacks and workarounds to all the problems you're going to find that you're going to end up with Upstart anyway. The other thing is he's very excited about C groups as a method of process supervision, because you don't have to do, it's completely passive. You just put a process in a C group, and that process, all of its children end up in the same C groups. Container group is a Linux feature. And therefore you just get a notification about when the C group becomes empty because all the processes have died. Various people remember I played with these with Upstart about 1.5 years ago. You may notice Upstart doesn't use them. This is because the screen problem, we start Getty for TTY1. You place a C group called TTY1, you put the Getty process into it. The bash and the login and the bash end up in the same C group. So even though the Getty's died, the C group's still open, so the service is still running. You start screen. You run IRC in screen, you detach the screen session, and you exit your bash shell. Screen and IRC is still running, the C group is still open, Gitty on TTY1 doesn't respawn. The only way out of this would be to modify the kernel so that a process was permitted to escape a container group. Case. It turns out the other people that use container groups are security people. They're used for, limiting processes to particular CPUs, or they use heavily in virtualization. Letting anybody escape a container group would be bad. So, yeah.
And not just for security.
And not just for security. So, yeah. So this is why Upstart doesn't use them. Upstart instead uses something called the prop connector, or will use something called the prop connector, which allows it to not use ptrace to follow. It uses ptrace right now. And I patched the prop connector a while ago, and the patch went into 32 to allow us to also get notifications of processes changing session ID. Because changing session ID makes it, is a relatively common thing processes do. This and a little bit of heuristic gives us enough to do process tracking relatively cheaply with a kernel socket, rather than needing to abuse something intended for completely different purposes.
The prop connector is very nice. I had a
Yeah.
little bit of a while back with the end of trying to write something that watched for a process exiting, like you sit there and boom.
Yep.
Yes.
So
it turned out it had approximately roughly 0 squared documentation, but the theory was clearly very nice.
yeah, so it's nice. It's we can do so really, and then Linux complaints that start on, stop on are evil. But we always we've said from the beginning they're only temporary. We're going to do this So really, his objection is fundamentally because of the copyright assignment agreement for Upstart, and his fundamental objection is because of that. His fundamental objection is that it uses BZR rather than Git as its revision control system, and his fundamental objection is it's written by Canonical, which he hates. So it's sad, but it's there. So it's worth putting a little bit of why. There are some things that says the one thing systemd does which is interesting is the starting a service on socket activation. Which we've kind of always talked about, having this idea of an INET side to Upstart, and we'll do that. But we don't need it. It's not very common that we need this particular use case, but when we get round to it, we'll talk about it. And cron and at are the other two. We've not needed them just yet, but they are in Upstart's design to have them. So starting a service on idle, look, I got to your question. You have to think, what is, the idea is, so one reason we would want these socket starting and dbus service activation starting, I'm more interested in the latter really, is that it lets you have a service which is defined to come up during the boot with a low priority. So you would have a service like Vahi is a good example actually, Cups is another good example, where you set the service such that it started on boot, has all the things, but as such a low priority, everything else started on boot happens first. So then once the boot's finished, I can start Cups now. So it happens later. And those might even be affected by CPU load. So things like, as long as the CPU's still got a high load during boot, and as long as the user's still mucking around with Firefox and stuff, it still doesn't start. And the connector we have to the kernel lets us monitor that relatively trivially. So you could say, lowest priority services are not started unless the CPU is below a certain load for a certain time period, which is kind of like what batch does, which is the other part of act, because we kind of need to inherit that anyway to do act support. So starting a service on after the system's become idle on boot becomes relatively simple. We can say, just start it as a lowest priority, then once the boot's completed, everything else has stopped, Upstart's got bored, it's idle, and the CPU's been low for a while, we can start the service. That's easy. But we obviously want if someone hits print in Firefox while they're mucking around, you want Cups to immediately leap up the priority stack. So that's where this idea of having the activation stuff is there. That's why we would do that. We wouldn't base an entire init system on this idea that everything connects to each other, but it's a good way of starting services which are ready to be started, we just haven't started them yet. So, you'd get Cups Mavahi some seconds after you boot in a lowest priority, fully nice, anything else would kill them away. But as soon as you hit print or you hit rhythm box or something, they would immediately get started because you connected to its port. Yeah, I was going to finish answering the question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The other thing is, starting when idle, is if you've got a task you want to run in the background, only when the system is idle. And again, the same CPU leveling monitoring stuff that we need for batch would let you do that. So you could have a service started on boot once the system's idle, and you could have a service or task that's only run while the system is idle. And that fits in with things like battery power. You could say, only when the system is idle and the system is not in a power saving state and it's not on battery. Those kind of group states and big colors with pretty icons and descriptions which you drag the service into would be classes of service. So an idle class service would be very much a deferred background service when the system's not doing anything. Does that answer your question?
Could I just clarify? Are you saying that these are things that could be done if you wrote some more code?
Yeah. This is all.
I think this guy, how would I make a job that starts when idle?
Today you can't.
Yeah,
you can't today. This is all discussion of Node 10 onwards. This is the next version of Upstart. So, okay, I didn't know that. All right. Yeah. So we're all talking about the next version of Upstart right now. Okay. However, you can do neat tricks to do it now. You could have the service started in such a way that it, in the pre-start, checks the CPU load. If the CPU load's too high, just sleeps and loops in its pre-start state. That would work right now. There are tricks to do it, but okay.
I was only going to ask a question to prompt the rest of the answer that you gave because I thought you might be done. Sorry.
That's what I thought. Okay. So yeah, I would just stress I am talking about future Upstart, but that's because we're in a Maverick, we're in a post-LTS, we get excited about the future. And
so you are expecting to have 0.10 in Maverick?
Yeah, I think 0.10 is going to be a long development process, but I think the bulk of it will go into Maverick and we'll extend it through, and it will form the basis of the next LTSs. The next I know exactly what the version number of the 12.04's Upstart is.
I have been trying to deduce your Upstart version numbering sequence.
1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 10.
Yes. I know the sequence so far. I'm trying to figure out the next one.
So dot 10 is
a longer set so you can figure out the...
Well, I could just fit a 6 variable linear regression to it.
Do you really want to know?
Maybe.
Or is it like the release name, just more exciting to not know and wonder what's coming next?
Possibly. I don't actually care that much, I'm just curious.
It's really not interesting. I pick a number that is suitably based on the level of development or change between one version to the next, I pick a number that's suitably far away. So 1, 2, 3 were very much, well, we shipped with 02 then 03, so they were very much the same version of Upstart, just mid-development, just big changes in the code. 5 was kind of a big lump. It was the same version of Upstart but with dbus. 6 is just a better 5 but stable. And 10 is now a big jump because it's a big change. And I do it even, so you see 1, 2, 3, 5, dot 7, dot, I do even in the dot. 10 is picked because it's kind of, you can move the dot over 1. So the version after 0.10 should be 1.0.
I think we have a technical problem here.
Icecast seems to have gone down. Oh.
Meh.
Hi. Cool.
Open people, thank you.
So yeah, that's, now that being said, I will go on the systemd stuff. Just briefly again, I don't necessarily, as I said, I think Leonard's wrong, but on the other hand, he might be right. Maybe I'm wrong. He may have not ousted me as mayor of wrong after all. So we'll see. We will, of course, evaluate that continuously, and we may change our minds. I'm convinced he's wrong. How I also think, I said there's a slim chance. If I was going to bet money, I would say there's no chance of Fedora and Red Hat adopting it because his team is not the team that actually maintain Upstart in RHEL, and the RHEL team maintain this, not Fedora team. In SUSE, I think they've just adopted Upstart, and I think there'll be a while before they adopt anything else. Their more conservative elements are that again, leaders in that side.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't be too
Yeah.
cocky, but
Yeah, and I think that, yeah, so that's probably more, Debian is the worry. I think we have to talk to
Debian's
Debian.
actually in some ways the most important one for us.
Yes, so I think if we should purely
So
concentrate.
you're still planning to go to
Debian,
from
yeah.
July?
Yeah, and I'd ask Steve to help get Debian to at least look at things the right way.
So BSD porting is still made outstanding ones?
Well, all the Upstart job stuff that we talked about, yeah. But the problem is that we've had the goalpost change so many times on that I need, we need a plan that involves, here is what we need. When this is done, the release managers will remove essential yes from sys5 init on behalf of Pekka, who seems to be unable to do that himself through not wanting to. Yeah. So anyway, okay. Well, yeah, I'm worried about Debian. I'm not particularly worried about anything else.
There's a question up here, in which version will Upstart implement non-destructive needs to disable the Java?
Not 10, Maverick. That's one of the earliest things to go into Maverick are the conf file changes. So, yes.
I saw on Launchpad it went to 0.7. We're just skipping that and going straight to 0.10 for...
Right, 0.7 was going to be a development version of Upstart that matched 0.6 but had some changes, and you may have noticed I instead did Upstart 0.65. So 0.7 got renamed to 0.65. So yeah. I split out the libnih out of its code base. So there's this library libnih which Upstart uses, which is also common to everything else I write. And 0.7 was supposed to have been Upstart 0.6 with libnih split out, but in the end I just decided 0.65. Everybody, once it was going to be a new release because I couldn't persuade the Red Hat guys to just ship them as separate packages, but then they suddenly found a need to as well, so then we just agreed, we'll just make it as part of the So yeah, if you've ever seen 0.7 anyway, just think 0.65. 0.65 is 0.7. Okay. They're the same, they are the same in the milestone and target. So all the milestones got moved and that target got deleted.
There's a dot between 6 and 5 there, right?
Yeah, it's 0.6.5. We actually 0.6.6 is in Maverick now, which is the same version of 0.65 that we actually shipped in Lucid, because I had a lot of patches that I had never got around to releasing upstream. La la la.
None of us have ever done that.
What's that?
None of us have ever done that.
Yeah.
We're pretty close to lunch.
Yeah, we're pretty close to lunch. So, any final questions? We've got about 5 minutes. Yeah.
Do you think any changes would be needed if we need to use Upstart on an embedded system?
No, I shouldn't think so. It's not an embedded system. I mean, it's as long as you've got the Linux kernel. I think some of the changes we're planning to make to Upstart will make it massively more beneficial for use on an embedded system. The idea that it can, actually help you save power by shutting down servers and stuff. But I can't think of anything really. I mean, it's relatively low touch in that respect. What do you were popping your hand up?
Yeah,
Disagree.
Well, no, I'm not disagreeing. I'm concerned about what you mean when we say embedded system in that context.
Well, to give you an
If you're
example,
talking about a system
anyone got
that's
a
running some processor that's relatively low power, that's traditionally used in embedded circumstances, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, has anyone got a Palm Pre in the room?
Building a telephony switch, I think you're talking about maybe something else.
Yeah, just give examples. Has anyone got a Palm Pre in the room?
That's a general purpose computer.
No?
It's just
Nokia
all embedded
N9
for historical.
Yeah, Nokia Red 900.
That's a general purpose computer.
They all run Upstart.
I think I should call it a mobile device then.
Yeah.
That would be better.
A mobile device is certainly very suitable for, and it's used in 2 of the most common ones.
And then you could also do the same thing on a NAS box or whatnot, because now they're powerful enough to do the right thing. If you want to do this on, say, to pick an example, on ARM3 design, you don't want to explore that.
No, not there. All right. Well, let's adjourn and go get lunch before everyone else.
Score.
Thank you.